Destructuring is the first feature we will cover in this section on JavaScript shortcuts. It is a feature that can really reduce the amount of code required. The purpose of destructuring is to unpack values from arrays and objects and place those values in variables. Because of its purpose, destructuring is sometimes referred to as destructuring assignment. I think the most important thing to remember when learning destructuring is that its purpose is to unpack values and assign them to variables. So if you keep that in mind, I think it helps learning what is going on. In this first topic, we will be dealing with destructuring assignment using arrays, and then we'll deal with objects in the next topic. So let's start with a simple example. Here I have an array with 6 items in it. Now let's say that I wanted to assign some of those items to a variable. Well, I can declare those variables using let, var, or const, any one of those 3, and use the destructuring square brackets, which is the exact same square brackets that we use for creating an array, but when we use them on the left side of the assignment operator, like what I'm doing here, on the left side of the assignment operator, it indicates destructuring. So what it's going to do is it's going to take the values from that array and it will assign them to variables that will be declared here. A, comma, B, comma, C. And it's in the order they are assigned. So 10 is going to be assigned to A, 20 to B, 30 to C. So that is destructuring. Very simple example. Now, let me just save this and we'll take a look at it really quick. Look at some of those variables so you can see that they are getting assigned. So if I enter A, that now has 10, B 20, and C 30. So it got assigned those values. Now think how much code would be required to do this without destructuring. So we saved quite a bit of code to be able to assign those three first values to those variables A, B, and C. And I can make those variables whatever I want. I used A, B, and C just to make it simple here. Now notice that I did not include all the values. So there were some values that were not assigned to anything. That's possible. I could have put 6 variables here and assigned all 6 of them to a variable. Now, what if we've already declared variables? In that case, we don't need to use let, const, or var in front of the destructuring assignment here. For example, let's come down here and I'm going to declare 2 variables, D and E. Now that these are already declared, I could do something like this. Now notice what I do at the start of this here. I put some commas in to skip values at the start and to assign D to the 4th value and then E. Once again, when the square brackets are on the left side of the assignment operator, then it's destructuring. Here on the right side is the array. So D and E will receive the numbers 40 and 50. Let's just look at that really quick. So D, 40, and E, 50. All right. So I was able to use variables that had already been declared and assign values to them. But also notice how I skipped values using the comma so that I could assign something in the middle of an array to a variable or at the end of an array like I did with E. So that is possible to do as well. Now, what would happen if I specified a variable for a value that did not exist? Let's do another line here. Here's my destructuring assignment. And I'm going to have a total of 5 commas. So I'm skipping everything because basically a variable would come before. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I want to skip one more. And then I'm going to assign this to F. So the variable I'm declaring there is F. and I'm going to set that equal to array 1. So what do we get in this case? Well, you probably guessed in a situation like this, f is going to be equal to undefined because there was nothing in that position. There was nothing in that 7th position to assign to this variable. Now, when we're dealing with something like that, a little nice trick you can do with destructuring is we could assign a default value. Let's say we put the default value of 60. So what this does, if a value doesn't exist in the array in the 7th position like we have here, then it's going to use this default value of 60. So really quick, let's look at that. So f is now equal to 60. However, if some value did exist there, now we have a 100, then f will take on that value. Okay, so that's how the default value would work. All right, now one application of destructuring that you will see on occasion is unpacking the values of an array that is returned from a function. So let's say a function returns an array and you want those values in individual variables so you can work with them much easier. And now that you know the basics of destructuring, you can probably figure that out. But let me go ahead and add a function here. I'm going to call it fun1. And all this function is going to do is simply return an array with 3 numbers in it. Okay. So seeing this function, how would you assign these 3 values to their own variables when the function is called? If you want to give that a try, go ahead and pause the video and give it a try on your own and see if you can figure it out. With what we've discussed so far, you can probably go ahead and do that. So if you're able to figure that out, great. But this is basically how we do that. I'm going to use const this time to declare these variables. Here's our destructuring assignment. And then here's my variables. I'm just going to do num1, num2, num3, just like that. This will be on the left-hand side of the assignment variable. And then on the right-hand side is where we invoke the function. So we invoke it, and since it's returning an array, those values in that array are going to be unpacked because of our destructuring here and placed in these individual variables. So if I save that and take a look at num1, sure enough, that's number 1, num2 is number 2, and finally num3 is a 3. So there we go. All right, 2 more examples. Let's go back to our array1 example that we have up here. Let's say you wanted to grab the first 2 values and then put the rest in an array. How would we go about doing that? Well, this one requires the use of the rest spread syntax. So let's go ahead and take a look at how that would be done. So I have a const with the destructuring assignment. I'm going to use G and H now. Those will take the first 2 values. Let me go ahead and do the right-hand side of this. We have array 1 here. So G and H will take the first 2 values, but what if I wanted to put everything else inside an array? Well, we can do that using the rest spread syntax. So what this is going to do is it's going to gather the rest of those values and put them in this variable here that will be declared. And this will be an array. So G and H will have 10 and 20, then everything else will be gathered together using rest and placed into this variable. So let's look at that. So G, of course, is 10, H, 20, now others. And there we see our array. Has everything else in it. So that's kind of a nice application if you need to pull out some of those and put the rest in another array. Now, the last example that I want to look at here. This is a nice little trick that can be done with destructuring. Using this technique, we can easily swap values between variables. Let me show you what I mean. So say we have two variables here. One is equal to 100, and then num5, let's say that's equal to 200. And we need to swap them. We need num4 to be 200 and num5 to be 100. Well, destructuring is a simple way to do this. Now, there's a couple things going on when I do this. Remember, on the left-hand side of an assignment operator, the square brackets indicate destructuring. On the right-hand side, it indicates creating an array or setting up an array. So if I put num4 and num5 on this side, these are going to be receiving values from the unpacking that's done on the right-hand side. Well, what are we going to unpack? Well, let's go ahead and create an array that we want to unpack. And that array is going to have the value of num5 and the value of num4. So on the right-hand side, we're setting up an array. Two things are going on here. We're setting up an array here, and then we're just destructuring it on the left-hand side. So we set up an array with num5 here, so the 200 and the 100. And then, of course, the 200 gets placed in the num4, the 100 gets placed in the num5. So basically, we've switched those by creating an array and doing destructuring all in the same statement line. All right, let's go ahead and see that done. So the end result should be that num4 will have 200 and num5 will have 100. Save that. Num4, sure enough, 200. And num5, 100. So really nice trick using destructuring for swapping values. And think about the amount of code that would take in order to swap those values. So really save some code there. All right, so that is destructuring using arrays. Next, we'll be looking at destructuring with objects.